meeting going. And as a reminder, if you do have your phone, please put it on silent so it won't disrupt our conversation. I would appreciate it very much, which I probably need to do myself, which I'm going to do that right now. Yep, it was not on. Anyway, this is the first meeting for the interim of the General Government, Finance, Personnel, and Public Retirement. This is two House Subcommittee committees combined with the Senate committee, and so we're going to go through, and we have a pretty extensive agenda today, so bear with us on this, on all this. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and ask Jennifer to call the roll.
Senator Funky Fromeyer. Senator Mills.
Here.
Senator Thomas. Senator Brown Jr. Senator Dossett. Senator Gentry. I'm sorry, Representative Gentry. Representative Vimes. I got you. Here. Representative Johnson.
Here.
Representative Palumbo. Representative Raymond. Representative Tate. Senator Bledsoe. Senator McDaniel. Representative Hale.
Here.
Representative Petrie.
Here.
Representative Reed. Representative Bratcher.
Here.
Representative Bridges. Senator Neems.
Present.
Representative Freeland.
Present.
And Chair Fleming.
I am present. Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, on the agenda, we have the Public Protection Cabinet. If folks can come up, I think it's Mr. Walburn and Mr. Wasson. I hope I pronounced it correctly. We're going to talk about the East Kentucky Flood Relief Fund as well as the Western Kentucky Tornado Relief Fund. So if you don't mind, go ahead and make sure your mic is on green. Introduce yourselves, and you have the floor.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members. My name is Jacob Walburn. I'm General Counsel for the Public Protection Cabinet.
Good morning. I'm DJ Wasson. Excuse me. I'm Chief of Staff for the Public Protection Cabinet.
And I apologize. I said Mr. I said Miss. I
It
apologize for
is
that.
not a problem. Thank you.
Go right ahead.
Well, thank you very much for having us today. We are from the Public Protection Cabinet, which is the agency that administers the Team Western Kentucky Tornado Relief Fund and the Team Eastern Kentucky Flood Relief Fund. These are the funds of private donations to assist those impacted by those disasters. So corporate donations, private individual checks, little bake sales, all of those things were donations to our funds. These funds go to assist individuals impacted by these disasters, things like living expenses, home repair, home replacement, unmet needs. The funds cannot be used for administrative costs. All of these funds go to those individuals. It's important to note, too, that now we have committed all of our funding that we have, either been dispersed or it's committed to one of our programs. We do report monthly in accordance with Senate Bill 99 to the A&R Committee. So those reports are available in much more detail. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to hit some of the high points of the donations and disbursements we've made, but happy to answer any questions that you all have. So starting with the Team Western Kentucky Tornado Relief Fund, there were about 150,000 donors to that fund, totaling just over $52 million. Those disbursements were made under various programs. So the first disbursements were to pay the funerals expenses of all who lost their lives as a result of the tornado. Next, we tried to get some immediate funding to individuals for those living expenses. So we provided funding to approximately 1,400 uninsured homeowners and renters, and that would total to just shy of $2 million. We then provided funding for insured homeowners and renters. That was about 6,100 people received that funding, and about $7.7 million went to those individuals, again, for those initial living expenses. We heard quite a bit that insurance wasn't covering all the costs of repairs. FEMA was not sufficient to cover repairs to homes or the impact of the storm, so a second distribution was made to those individuals, which was just shy of 10,000 people, in the amount of about $9.9 million, just shy of 10,000. So the other programs that we have under the Team Western Kentucky Tornado Relief Fund included the grain assistance program. The grain elevator in Graves County was destroyed as a result of the tornado. Those farmers came to us, local officials came to us and asked if we could help offset some of the expenses for now having to transport grain. So we did have a program to do that, which covered about $4 million to those farmers. The largest need we have heard in talking with local officials, volunteer organizations, long-term recovery groups is the need for housing. Homes were destroyed, homes were severely damaged. So we, in cooperation with now 6 nonprofits, have entered into agreements to build or repair homes. We've committed $18.6 million currently to that program. 13.9 has been dispersed so far, and we've just provided funding for a 105th home, so 105 homes so far. Our goal is to provide funding that will cover 300 homes in the area. And the final program we have under the Western Kentucky Tornado Relief Fund is our partnership with the long-term recovery groups to provide for unmet needs. Those would be things, again, home repairs that they had been uninsured for, underinsured for. We're seeing, quite honestly, a lot of need for gutters, additional windows, additional flooring. We see that a lot in the home repair category. We also cover vehicle repairs, essential furniture. Sometimes there was enough funding to replace the home, but they'd lost all their appliances or their furniture. So those are the types of unmet needs that we fund. We committed currently $8.4 million to that, and we've dispersed about 2.7 so far. So those are ongoing programs. Moving then to the east, the Team Eastern Kentucky Flood Relief Fund. We had about 41,598 donors, and we collected about $13.3 million in that program. Again, we paid for the funerals. There were 44 funerals we have paid for those who lost their lives as a result of the flood. We again provided supplemental payments for living expenses. Currently, that's at 8,043 payments, totaling $4 million. And then we turned again to housing. There were so many homes lost or with major repairs needed as a result of the flood. And so with the remaining funding, that's where we've placed our focus. We provided funding to Foundation for Appalachia, Kentucky for a matching grant to repair 80 homes. We have provided funding to 2 nonprofits, the Housing Development Alliance and Homes, Inc., in those hardest hit areas to build currently 13 homes with that. So Housing Development Alliance has $450,000, Homes, Inc. has $525,000 based on what they thought they could build. I do believe that maybe they're going to come back to us from additional funding. And then when I say for what they can build, the biggest challenge, quite honestly, in speaking with those nonprofits and with others in the area is just finding land to build on, finding flat land outside of the floodplain to build on. And so as has been announced, the Team Kentucky Commonwealth is looking for sites to build on. We've announced a site in Knott County that we call Olive Branch. We've announced a site in Perry County called Skyview. These are high ground sites out of the floodplain. And so our remaining funding will be used to begin housing development in those areas. So that's about $6.6 million. So that is a lot of information, very high level. Again, all of these reports are submitted to the Appropriations and Revenue Committee. They're available on the committee's website, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Weston. I appreciate the debrief. And I do have a couple of questions that I want to go through, and I'll have some of my members chime in on their questions they might have as well. Let me go back to the very beginning to get a little bit of perspective and the framework of how this came to be. Obviously, as a reaction to catastrophes that we need to respond and assist those in eastern and western Kentucky and so forth. And you explained a little bit about money came in from private as well as corporations, individuals. There's no administration costs allocated to this and so forth. So that's what other purpose was it for, but more in particular, what legal basis did y'all have in terms of setting this fund up?
So as the attorney, I'll try to take a stab
Sure.
at the legal basis. So we have provided feedback both to the legislature and to the state treasurer about the inherent legal bases that rest within KRS Chapter 12, assignments that the governor is capable of making of his cabinet secretaries. When we provided that information to the legislature, you all have now codified our program guidelines and processes through Senate Bill 99. Has legally formalized that basis. But the Western Kentucky Fund, when it started with an emergency declaration and an emergency regulation, which has subsequently been extended. Eastern Kentucky Fund was set up marginally differently, but again, vesting on those powers that are vested in the governor, giving direction to his cabinet secretaries in order to take in money for the Commonwealth and provide expenditures for public purpose.
Who did you talk to in the General Assembly?
We've provided information in response
No,
to
who in
legislation.
particular did you talk to in the General Assembly when y'all setting this fund up?
The governor would have issued the EO.
Okay.
We have provided information in response to several legislative inquiries, both committees and individual legislators.
Okay. All right. Now, I appreciate the comment because my understanding there's no communication to the administration in terms of setting this up. So what type of accounts was this? This is a 501c3? Was it an LLC? What type of a structure that you established?
It's not a 501c3 or an LLC.
So you said it's an EO in terms of regulations and so forth. I'm still a little bit concerned about how y'all went through that and then allocated the appropriations of the money in that without oversight from the General Assembly. Could you explain that?
Not sure could you rephrase that question? I'm not sure I followed it entirely.
When you established this and started accepting funds, let me back up. How did y'all solicit the fund? How did y'all raise the money in order to do that? Was the administration tasked to go out there and generate the money, or was this through other individuals, other corporations to help generate the money?
So I think the primary source of our donations were online donations. State websites, including the legislature's websites, carried a banner to donate to the respective funds, first Eastern and then move to the Western Kentucky funds. The vast majority, in terms of number of donations, would have come in through that online link. In terms of, I can only speak for what Public Protection has done. We have not solicited any donations. We've been contacted by individuals seeking to donate, but to my knowledge, no one in the administration tasked anyone with going out and explicitly raising any funds. Certainly we didn't do that at Public Protection.
And what was the criteria for dispersing the funds prior to money being transferred to Senate Bill, the account that Senate Bill 99 established?
So each different program had adopted its own specific program guidelines.
And who made those decisions?
The Public Protection Cabinet, we made recommendations and we spoke with all of our agencies involved in disaster relief to get the best program available. We got a lot of input from local governments, just of what the need is from volunteers in the area that are active in disaster, long-term recovery groups, different individuals contacted us, and so then we would investigate the need and have discussions to verify those, and created the programs. And so there are program guidelines for each program where we made those disbursements.
Okay, so you didn't have any type of weighted criteria to go through and say who had the most need or where the focus should be. This is sort of I don't want to say a shotgun approach in terms of distributing the money.
Well, I don't. So I would agree that we didn't have weighted criteria. I do think, however, we were applying criteria and feedback we got from local officials. Probably the most significant interaction we've had with local entities are through the long-term recovery groups. Ms. Wasson explained how those monies had been allocated. But basically, we engaged in an interactive process there with the local entities telling us, what information can you give us to help assess what needs are not being met here? So we've been trying to address, I think, when you have a disaster, you have a whole different pool of resources that come in, different nonprofits who have different interests, different areas they're trying to address. These funds we've attempted to use to be kind of the gap fillers. Where are needs coming in where there isn't a readily identifiable source of money? I think a great example of that is the grain assistance program. That was a direct request from local officials in Western Kentucky saying, hey, these farmers can't afford to get their grain. They used to be able to drive it to Mayfield. Now they actually have to drive it to the river, is my understanding, is where that's, and there's significant transportation costs associated with that. So how can we come up with a way to equitably distribute funds to farmers who've been negatively impacted without taking any administrative costs? Thankfully, the granary in Mayfield, and it's unfortunately not going to be rebuilt, but could not have been any more helpful with the information they provide us. Here's the farmers that use us. Here's the volume that we expect to see from them from year to year. Here's a way to get in touch with them. Let us help you distribute information so this money's getting to the right people. So that is a specific example of one program and how it came to evolve. I would candidly tell you, I don't think we've been approached by a program that we haven't been able to support. We found a way to work with everybody who's attempted to approach us to get money. But in terms of weighted criteria, no, there are not weighted criteria. In terms of taking feedback from people on the ground about what is actually needed, I do think we have engaged in that process.
Thank you. And tell me again, what type of a government, what type of a corporation was set up, or what type of legal entity that y'all established if it wasn't a 501c3?
So these are, at the time, they were off-budget accounts. As a result of Senate Bill 99, they're on-budget accounts out of our cabinet. So they're just
On budget accounts. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then last question, and we'll open it up. I see you, Senator, so just hold tight. Why did y'all transfer the money from the relief fund to the safe fund? Y'all transferred money. Why did y'all?
We did not, to my knowledge, we did not transfer money to the safe funds.
Oh, that's my understanding, that the money was transferred over to the fund that we set up under Senate Bill 99.
Oh, so that would be having the private donation funds available, but they did not go to the safe fund. They are in a disaster fund that, as a result, an on-budget account as a result of Senate Bill 99.
So that's a third account or fourth account? I don't understand.
And I'm not an accounting expert, so I'm about to get into an area that I probably need to get back with you on to make sure I'm saying the correct words.
Because you have the Eastern and Western, and you also
Correct.
you have the new you have the well, actually you got the Western, Eastern, and you have those funds that transferred over. So is there another fund that remained?
Hi, Mr. Chairman, John Hicks, State Budget Director. As a result of Senate Bill 99, we created an on-budget account, transferred the funds from the pre-existing Team Kentucky West, Team Kentucky East funds to that Senate Bill 99 account, and that's where all disbursements are being made.
Okay, so
now.
what's transferred over?
Yes, but not to the safe fund. That was completely separate.
Okay, so
But it was Senate Bill 99.
Okay, good. All right.
Thanks.
Good. All right. I think Senator Mills, you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just had a couple questions about the particular that affected my district were the checks, the distributions that came out. And I was trying to take some notes down. So there was the first, I guess, batch of checks that came out were to uninsured. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then another batch came out to insured.
Correct.
And then was there a third batch for unmet insured needs? Is that correct?
So there was a third batch to both uninsured and insured individuals. The people who received the checks in the first and second rounds got a second payment.
Right. So I guess one of my questions, I know particularly two individuals that kind of stopped me on the street, and this happened in a new county that I just picked up in redistricting. So a lot of people don't have my phone numbers and things like that, but they were asking questions through the county judge and magistrates and things of that nature. But they were just really confused about the checks. Did they have any kind of explanation in the like a page that said this is for and then this is from, and then did they actually say they were from the governor, or were they from the state of Kentucky, or how was that explained?
They did. There was a letter that went with the checks explaining where the money was from and why it was being distributed. There was, I will say, there was some confusion because there was a notation of second supplemental check on the memo line, and some people that didn't get the first checks. It was the comments that we received. We did talk to those people and try to figure out, should they have received it? Were they eligible for the first check? Where did the first check go? Right. When the first checks were distributed, we were very much in the aftermath of the disaster. People were very transient. And so we did have a lot of checks returned where we did not have good addresses, so that was a common reason.
Right.
But we investigated all of those, and if they were eligible, they received their first check as well.
Okay, and then finally, just my last follow-up question is just how would you answer the question for a couple of people that I have that are still saying they had an insured loss, they had a lot of damage, they still have needs in their home, but they never got a check?
So they are welcome to contact us, and I'm happy to provide you with information about that. We are still seeing a handful of people in those situations. We verify their insurance claim with the insurer, so we'll reach out to the insurer, verify the claim. If they're eligible, we'll issue the check. If they still have unmet needs because they received those checks and insurance just simply didn't cover all of their needs, we usually have them go to their long-term recovery group, see if there's funding there, or can refer them to Commonwealth has a case management program as well. So there's still some ways. I also know American Red Cross is still in the area. So we try to connect them with different resources we know are still available, and see if there's any place that they can get assistance there.
I will tell you that I went to a home to a ribbon cutting in my district, and that $75,000, I believe, was used. Isn't that correct, Jason? I think that, yeah. So that was, we've seen, those new houses starting to pop up, and they do look good. Were the insurance companies open to sharing all the information that you asked them for?
Absolutely. They were very helpful. We did 2 data requests with them, one to simply identify where the damage was, and then one to get information to verify these payments, and they provided that information and continue to help us respond to those inquiries.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Bratcher.
I'm still trying to figure out or understand who decides who gets what money, because I've got an example I'm getting ready to give you where they came to you and were turned down. So who decided who got what money?
So we did create eligibility programs for all of the programs that I described. And so for the uninsured program, for money that those direct payments given to uninsured homeowners and renters, that was based upon whether someone received assistance from FEMA. So we worked with FEMA to verify those who received assistance. For the insured homeowners, they were information that we received from the insurance companies. If they filed a claim or not, we verify that and issue the funding. For the grain program, that was based upon deliveries to that grain elevator, and we worked with the grain elevator for that information. For the long-term recovery groups, they do their own case management. We do not. We don't have administrative costs come out of this fund, so we rely on the long-term recovery groups to provide that.
Who decides which checks are being written?
So again, it would depend upon the program. So if they meet the eligibility requirements, they come to our office. There's 2 people that review them, and the checks are then issued.
So all that are eligible will receive?
If they're eligible, and each program has different guidelines. So, and some are case managed by, the homes go through the nonprofit partners. You'd have to be eligible through, for example, Habitat for Humanity is one of our partners.
Right in my area, my district in Louisville and Jeffersontown, there's a group called USA Cares, and they take care of, they help veterans that come back from wars and any veterans that are having issues. There were 35 families. You're shaking your head like you know this.
I spoke with USA Cares, and
They didn't receive a dime, and they still to this day don't know why, because to hear and it's just their side of the story, and they mean a lot to my district because they do a lot of great work. They said they were given the complete runaround from you guys.
I mean, I would respectfully disagree. We did speak with them. The Eastern Kentucky Flood Relief Fund, we have some pretty limited funds with a lot of needs. So we did meet we asked them for specific information about the homes. Were they total rebuilds that were needed? Were they repairs? We're primarily focused on rebuilds, although we did give funding for Foundation for Appalachia, Kentucky for a matching grant. We referred, we said, give us that case information. We are happy to work with you and connect you with one of our partners to assist in building homes for those veterans. And that's where that conversation ended. We didn't get that feedback. But again, our goal is providing homes for individuals who were impacted by the flood. So if there's conversations
it was 35 National Guard members whose houses were destroyed, and so they have a lot of questions, and they said they can't get a hold of anybody. I've got names here that they've tried to contact.
Representative Bratcher, you have one more question. We do have several other people.
One more question.
And we have a 10:30 meeting.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I like to stop early, but I get too lazy to stop. So. To quote Lincoln. One last question. The $1,000 that you sent out, and they were wrongfully sent out, right? I mean, did you get those back? Is that the thing?
So that second group of checks that went to uninsured and insured homeowners and renters, yes, we did get some of those back for multiple reasons. Some people indicated that they didn't file a claim with FEMA, so we have sent those to FEMA to research those and turn those over for their fraud activity.
Thank you.
Yep.
Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Chairman Fleming. Ms. Watson and Mr. Walburn, I want to make sure I got this right. We're talking about monies that were donated out of the goodness of people's hearts, kindness, following the tornado disaster in December of 2021, and then the floods in the spring of last year. These are private monies that people, gave, to help with the flood relief victims. Is that the money we're talking about?
Correct.
Yes, sir.
We aren't talking about public appropriations, are we?
Correct.
So we're talking about private monies. I just want to get that fact clear. Okay. And then after receiving these privately donated funds, then you and your agency, set up various accounts as to how that money was going to be dispersed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, did this money then go to those individuals who were harmed or damaged or injured as a result of the devastating tornadoes in Western Kentucky, or to the floods in Eastern Kentucky?
There are provisions in both program guidelines now, as codified with Senate Bill 99, that the money has to directly go to help individuals who were impacted. So you have to, we call it the individual traceability requirement. We have to be able to draw a line between the money we give to somebody and that person being a victim of one of the respective disasters.
Was there any instance in which the money was ever allocated or appropriated to anyone who was not either harmed by the tornadoes or damaged by the floods?
So I would say that the intent was no, right? All of the programs we established were given to people who were impacted by the floods and the tornadoes, and so if there is an example of someone, we're happy to research that. But all of the money was targeted to people who were impacted by the disaster.
So we're not talking. I mean, it seems to me that we're not talking about any indication where any public monies were spent, or any privately donated funds were either misused or misappropriated to anyone who was not harmed or damaged by the tornadoes or floods.
Correct. No program was designed that way, no.
Just want to get that straight. All right, thank you.
Senator McDaniel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Guys, thank you very much for being here today. Two brief questions. First of all, whose idea was it to initiate the fund?
I mean, it was created by executive order. Whose specific idea, I don't know, but the governor issued an executive order creating the funds.
Very good. Okay, and then clearly there's been good that's happened with this, and there's also been missteps that have happened with this. If you had to take one lesson learned out of it and say we would have done X differently, what would that be?
Oh, goodness.
Or if there's a bunch, go into a bunch.
No, I would have to. Honestly, we're still so very much into administration of these funds. I mean, there isn't an intent to sit down and do lessons learned. We went right from the tornado to the floods. So with our intent of getting funding to people as quickly as possible to provide the most help, especially in the aftermath. So are there things we could have done better? I'm sure that there are. To sit here right now and articulate those, I'm not sure I have that thought in my mind yet, but happy to think through that. Obviously, we want to always improve. That's what you want to do with any program, is see where you did good, where there were missteps. I think if I had to say one thing right now, we did work with FEMA to get some data in. And better understanding how that data was filtered probably is something that I'd want to understand better, those data sources, to make sure that we were getting funding to individuals as quickly as possible and it had gone through their filters, because we relied on a lot of data sources for that and probably want to dig into that data a little bit more.
If I were to tack on to that, data has been kind of the revelation of working in disasters. Public protection historically has not had a role in disaster response. We're the regulatory cabinet. So being tasked with this, one thing that I have learned a lot is the data flow during disasters is both intermittent in that it'll come very fast and then dry up, but also it's evolving targets. I think if you were to ask the leading nonprofits in Eastern Kentucky right now, how many homes were destroyed by the Eastern Kentucky floods, you'd get 5 different answers. There's just not that consistency of data. And so to build on what DJ shared, which I strongly agree with, is when you get data from FEMA, you think that's probably pretty accurate, but even FEMA would tell you, no, as the disaster evolves and we get more information, our response gets better. Now that we've lived through a couple of these, and hopefully we never have to do anything on this scale again, but if this were to happen again, I now have a much greater appreciation for what data is available when and how that data evolves. Nobody's misleading you, but it's just the best information they have at the time.
But you raise an interesting question, though, with your response there, Mr. Warburton, which is this. So you guys aren't the lead agency for disasters. You're also not the lead agency for finance. So how did we end up with this fund housed at public protection rather than finance or emergency management or some other place?
So ultimately, that's a decision that was made that I was not privy to that answer. But I to speculate, I think 2 things. One, we have been tasked with fund administration in other contexts. The legislature authorized $75 million for nonprofits this past session that we did awards for. So we kind of had that infrastructure already built and that we have administered funds.
But prior to this, you really didn't. Madam Secretary, do you have any different opinion on that? On why this got housed there rather than finance or somewhere else?
I do not. I don't have an opinion. I just think in a disaster there are so many roles and so many needs that it was kind of all hands on deck, and this was just an area that we could be of assistance in. We do have as as Mr. Walburn said, we do have some experience in fund management. We have some experience in databases and those types of things that help us manage the funds. So I just think we were just part of a team of many agencies that was chosen to help.
Very well. Thank you both very much. Do appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome, Senator. And if y'all don't mind, we do have a couple other people on here, so if you can keep your questions short and concise, as well as the answers short and concise, we can get these in here. So Senator Mays Bledsoe.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you both. I'm going to follow up a little bit on what Chairman McDaniel mentioned, and I'll be very quick too. So I know it's in your house, in your cabinet. How many? And even though it's private dollars, it was managed by publicly funded employees. So I think the oversight is still relevant. How many staff members in your cabinet were kind of dedicated to the effort? I mean, broadly.
So it's come in and out depending on where you are in funding particular programs. I would say that Ms. Wasson and I are probably the point people within the cabinet. Generally, we rely on administrative staff. So one of the things that we do, I'm sorry to give a little bit of a longer answer, but to explain, when a long-term recovery group makes a request for an individual survivor to get an award, they typically do not provide any what I'll call census data with that. We don't know a name, we don't know an address. That way the application is truly being judged anonymously on the basis of need. Not that I'm going to know somebody in Western Kentucky, but it takes away that. Those are processed by administrative staff. One administrative staff person primarily looks at those when she has other duties or other things to do to sub in. I would say that probably 10 to 12 employees across the cabinet touch this in some way. Certainly none are dedicated on a full-time basis, but depending on where we are in any given program, it can take up more or less of the time as things go through.
No, that's helpful. And did they receive any training on how to do their jobs well or to evaluate well?
Certainly, as we create programs or as programs are implemented, we go through training regimes. We're a relatively small cabinet. I think we are considered a small cabinet by state government standards. We've got 600 employees, and many of them are remote. So we're a pretty close-knit group. But yes, there is absolutely training for each of the programs that come through.
Including that one.
Correct.
And then, were there any other cabinets that were considered Team Kentucky with the fund that were involved?
Well, I think certainly everyone's updated to make sure that we're not duplicating funding sources. If there's a funding source for another need, we certainly talk. So obviously Kentucky's emergency management talks. Finance cabinet is part of us. We certainly keep the governor's office updated on all of this. And, we, especially in Eastern Kentucky, as we consider housing, we're working with both transportation and energy and environment cabinet. So there's a whole multi-state agency effort as we move forward. And also Cabinet for Health and Family Services, who has case management, again, to make sure that we're not duplicating benefits. The needs are great, and the money needs to be stretched as much as possible. So
I would probably throw in local government as well. They
local government.
funnel a lot of inquiries from local officials to us and help us address specific problems.
That's what I assumed.
Senator, I'm sorry.
Can I get last question?
Make it quick.
Okay. The last
please.
one is just, is there precedent for private dollars being used for a government program in this nature, or was this really the precedent-setting program?
So so the first private dollar fund that Kentucky ever did was actually called the Team Kentucky Fund, and it was a pandemic response fund. So that was the precedent in Kentucky. There is precedent for both private and public-private and truly public donations. The Boston Marathon is something that we've based a lot of our work on. That was a significantly large fund that was raised with public involvement. We've based a lot of what we've done on Boston. So Boston is probably the precedenting case nationally. Team Kentucky Fund, the pandemic response, that fund is now no longer operational. It doesn't have any money left. But those were the two, what I'll call case studies.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I understand you've been tasked with a daunting job and something that's never been done before. But with that in mind, there's been a number of times you've been asked who set up these funds, how were these accounts set up, the details of the accounts. I know you can't set up an account without having official documentation. You got to have a federal ID number. You have sustainable documents for any lending institution or any financial institution set up these accounts. And I have had a couple of calls from some people that I will remain nameless, but there's been some I know the majority may have been individual donations online or whatever, small amounts, but there have been some substantial dollars donated from corporations and things. And if these accounts are not set up as a 501(c) or whatever, are these companies going to have problems when with tax filings and everything, either at a state or a federal level, that these funds will not be deductible?
So I want to give the disclaimer that any lawyer sitting in my seat would. I am not a tax attorney and do not give.
And neither am I. But
Fair.
those are concerns, and so we need to. Although
no, and with that disclaimer, I would say that every individual tax circumstance is going to vary, but it is my understanding that these contributions are fully deductible, as we have discussed with the Finance Cabinet. That donations to those funds would be deductible.
If you don't mind, you said you could get back with us on some documentation and everything. I'd like to see that documentation on those specific accounts, how they were set up, whose authority set them up, and how that proceeds. Because when you start talking about these numbers, these are not small numbers. They may have been small donations, but they were large numbers. And as public protection that you fall under, I'm sure you want to protect the public as well as anyone, and to make sure that these are used in a meaningful manner, in a responsible manner, and that they weren't raised under one pretense, spent for another, or whatever. So I just have to ask the question: is, could there warranted some sort of audit done, and not necessarily an audit, but a learning curve, so that we can figure out what mistakes were made, maybe the small one, and nothing intentional. I don't mean that, but so we can learn for the next one, so we can be better prepared in the future. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Hale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be very brief. In 2012, I'm going back, we had a devastating tornado come through my area. Menifee County, Menifee, Morgan, Wolf, some in McGoffin. For 3 years, I served as the long-term recovery chair and worked with Habitat for Humanity, Red Cross, a lot of other organizations. The one organization that gave us hardly any help to our citizens was FEMA. We struggled with that. They got very little assistance. My question is, how would you assess what FEMA has done in both of these disasters? Would you say that their response was good, bad, or like I found it to be 11 years ago, horrible?
I think there are pros and cons to how they responded. Certainly, certainly there are some individuals still that are struggling. What I would say is I talk to FEMA quite often just to understand what we can continue to do to assist. My relationship with FEMA has, and the people I deal with, the people that handle housing needs, the people that handle some of the data that we receive, has grown as we've worked together. I think you can always improve.
Well, again, just really brief. I hope that it's been better than what we encountered over a decade ago. And I will say this, I want to say that when the governor actually called them out when they weren't doing their job, and I actually told him that I appreciated him calling them out, and I don't know how much that helped, but I think I have seen really a lack of response in our area a decade ago, and talking to people that I've known in those areas, it seems to have been similar to what we experienced 11 years ago. So that's just kind of a comment, but I wanted to see what your assessment was. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative. And Chairman Petrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank y'all for being here. Good information. It sounds like we have these two funds way back when. Team Kentucky funds created by executive order based on inherent, not actual authority, for which implementation of the executive order would have been more than $10,000 worth of time and materials, which I'm not sure that it's been violative of budget language when you have an executive order of that magnitude, for which there has never been an intent or a design to do harm or misuse money, but there has been actual unintended misuse going funds to people that which should not have received or would have been otherwise eligible with further inquiry. And because donations to these type funds are based on the goodness of people's hearts, we want to be extra careful that there's no bad flavoring given, so that when future events happen and future donations may be solicited or recommended, that people are willing to do so. Do you have a total of what funds were expended prior to the substantial codification of those executive orders in Senate Bill 99?
I can certainly get that.
Will you get that to us in 7 days?
I'll try my best, yes.
10 days? Can we get them in 10 days?
I will try my best. Obviously, I need to work with accounting staff for that, but
So can we get them as quickly as we can?
as quickly as you can.
Very good. And those are funds expended prior to the effective date of the codification through Senate Bill 99. Do you currently have an idea of what the unliquidated or unobligated fund balance is of these two?
So unobligated, we have committed all of the funds.
So there's 0 unobligated.
Correct.
Okay. And then of the obligated but not yet expended, what is that?
I can certainly get that for you.
And what is the timetable for that expenditure?
Okay.
Given that this is an emergency type situation we're trying to get relief out to, I would hope that those monies would be obligated. If they've been obligated 30, 60, 90 days or more just yesterday, it will be good to get those funds out in 30 or 60 days rather than 6 or 8 months, given the nature of what the expenditures are for. So that's what I'm interested in finding out by document as quickly as you can. Is there an oversight mechanism in either the executive order or internal regulations to make sure that the contributions by private individuals into these relief funds are not going out to entities or contractors for which a solicitation may come back from them or donation might come back to them in a campaign or some other route? Not to say any of that may or may not be legal or ethical. It's just to avoid the impropriety, the appearance of something not good. Is there some kind of oversight mechanism or quality control mechanism that you have?
So each of the checks, as I talked about earlier, is subject to an individual traceability requirement. So the check is paid to the benefit of John Smith's survivor. The payments that we're making are really only going to individuals, nonprofit organizations that are constructing the homes. In the grain scenario, the farm entity. I'm thinking those are the only checks we've ever issued. So in as much as checks can only be issued to individuals, nonprofits, or a farm program, that oversight mechanism would be in place.
Okay, so there's no mechanism after the fact to make sure that when contributions come back, political or otherwise, from an entity or someone who is a primary stakeholder in an entity, those things are not coming back to give an appearance of an unethical or illegal quid pro quo, trade back, quid pro quo. Just making sure that we have something to watch for. Apparently we don't, that's fine. You may want to look at it just to make sure we're avoiding that appearance problem. Because again, these donations in substantial aggregate are based out of the goodness of people's hearts. We want to make sure there's no bad flavoring or bad appearance out there to denigrate that later on in the future. Lastly, mostly a comment, an angle that hasn't been discussed yet today. You talked about internal to executive branch about duplicating funding sources to make sure efficient use, which is great. But that also occurs between two branches of the government also. So the executive branch and the legislative branch. So when you've got these type of emergencies going on and you've got legislative oversight and legislative funding that we're trying to deal with, it would be greatly advantageous to Kentuckians for the legislative branch to be wheeled in and consulted and talked to, discussed with, so we have a better idea of where funds are going to be going, what purposes they're going to be used for, what federal monies may be coming down to synergize with these type funds, so that we don't ineffectively or inefficiently allocate general fund money that could have been synergized in a different way. So I would just encourage that. I know an emergency is an emergency. A forethought is difficult, and you do the best you can. This is a suggestion for in the future when you do those postmortems and go back, how could we have done it better? That would be something. I'll be glad to talk with you about it, on the detail of how that information flow back and forth between the two branches would have been useful in this particular instance, to the tune of several tens of millions, if not $100 billion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I have one last question, and y'all be excused. The Chairman, Petrie, reminded me, since this was established prior to the money being transferred, did y'all consult with the EBC on Advisory Opinion 1609 in terms of the ethics code and how things are transacted and how things are conducted?
I would have to see that specific, but no, I don't believe we did on that
So-
specific. That specific opinion doesn't ring a bell. But if I could see it, maybe we had addressed that concern. I'm not
Okay.
familiar, as I said here.
Because when you raise money for charitable organizations and so forth, particularly when a government entity, you got to be conscious of ethics issues and so forth. So that's why I bring that up. And it sounds like there wasn't any consultation or any consideration of that, which I understand. So, okay. Well, thank you all very much for coming. Appreciate your time and effort. Did you? Okay. All right. Well, all right. Go ahead, Representative Johnson. You have one last question. He'll wrap it up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And in the interest of time, I'm actually going to ask for a written response on this. If you have a comment you want to make, you're certainly welcome to. But I'm interested in the contracting process and the letting of contracts and the entire process of how contractors were picked and the oversight on payments to these contractors. So if you could please, if you could provide a written response to the committee, just detailing that process, if you would. I don't know that there's any other oversight that's even discussed that issue. So this might be for a future conversation, but if you could provide a written response on how that process is working, how the oversight to make sure that contractors are doing the work they're supposed to be doing and being paid accordingly.
Be glad to do that. One thing I can tell you just from an oversight perspective is all of those contracts are subject to the jurisdiction of the Government Contract Review Committee. So all contracts that have been entered through these funds have gone through that process, but we'll certainly supplement that with a written answer.
And 10 days?
As quickly as that one is a little more in my world, so I can I don't have to go to the accountants for that one.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, General Counsel. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And we have we need to be out of this room by 10:30. In fact, probably around 10:28. Allow another committee to come in here. So we're going to be pressed for time. So I like to try to keep the next presentation within 15-20 minutes, as well as the other one. So the first, we'd like to have the Finance Administration come up and talk about the capital construction and relocation for the constitutional offices. And I appreciate your time to going through this, Secretary and Director. Appreciate your patience on going through this. So, sure. Yeah, it's an easy topic.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Hicks, Secretary of the Executive Cabinet.
Hi, Holly Johnson, Secretary of the Finance and Administration Cabinet.
Sam Ruth, Commissioner of Facilities.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We just have a brief update. You had asked for a discussion on the process of communicating and identifying the relocation of occupants of the state capitol during the upcoming Capitol renovation project. It's a $287 million project, $260 million of which was appropriated in this past budget session. Earlier elements, began with the design of the mechanical and electrical upgrades and exterior renovations. You see the scaffolding on the dome. Architect and engineering firms were selected. EOP is a primary architectural firm. They're being assisted by Preservation Design Partnership, a specialist in historic building renovations. The design of the project's well underway. It's expected to be completed by about February of 2024. The current plan is to let construction bids in the spring of 2024 and for construction to begin around June of 2024. So wanted to give you a sense of the timeline ahead of us. The entire project is estimated to take at least 3.5 years to complete. And so wanted to open it up with a little bit of a background.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As the design got underway, the Finance and Administration Cabinet began preliminary discussions earlier this year with the current occupants of the Capitol building. about the process and the timing of relocating during the project's construction. Those discussions will continue as the construction plans are finalized. The Finance and Administration Cabinet is examining relocation options that will meet the space needs of the building's occupants. And this will likely involve the leasing of privately owned space. These discussions will continue in earnest this summer as final determinations still remain to be made. We don't yet have concrete dates or locations. That will depend on the sequencing of the construction project and the impact of the timing of the move for those capital occupants.
And Mr. Chairman, and one item very important to this committee is that the affected budgets of the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, the Governor's Office, other occupants of the Court of Justice, some elements of the legislative branch, will be held harmless by this. The project account will absorb the cost of relocation and move to the eventual temporary space and their associated rents. So I wanted to make sure that was clear to this committee, is that we're not imposing upon the next budget process, a requirement to add funding to the Secretary of State's budget to accommodate their relocation. And as to the legislative branch broadly, the architectural firm has had a number of discussions with the Finance Administration Cabinet and are considering various options to accommodate, the legislative branch's needs, and so with the judicial branch, and they are currently considering actions to accommodate their needs during the project's construction. So we're available to answer any questions.
I'll get to both of you in a second. One thing I have talked to both constitutional officers, that's an AG office as well as Secretary of State, and I want to plead with y'all to have a better communication. I do apologize. Thank you, Representative Bretcher. I just wanted to make sure that the communication line is totally transparent, open to the AG as well as the Secretary of State. They have voiced some concerns that they're not being fully disclosed of how things are going, particularly in the AG office, in terms that I think they got to take care of through a bill we pass on the child support, in terms of making sure that they absorb all that. So they're really, really concerned about relocation, continuing service, about all this. So I would strongly stress that you continue to keep them in the loop, let them know what's going on, so they can adjust their calendar and how they perform their service and so forth. And Secretary, you mentioned about leases and so forth. And is there like a 1024 building? I don't know if I wrote.
Yes, because I came from the AG's office, I happen to know that they do have a secondary office, that is 1024 Capitol Center Drive.
Okay.
I happen to know that because of my history, that not only are they located in the Capitol, but they have quite a large presence there.
Okay. And I understand that the landlord is in receivership. There's some issues going on with that, and they're
that I'm not aware of. Sam, do you have any particular information?
Landlord that is.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Could you turn your mic on, sir?
Sorry. Mm-hmm. We do have a landlord that's in receivership.
Okay, and you've got plans how to address that, how to deal with that?
My understanding is there's other people that are looking to acquire those properties, but we have no details on how that's going.
Okay. Senator Miles. Mills, sorry.
Sorry. Two short questions. The first one, the chairman started getting into the question, will there be a survey of any available space before we lease any new space for these offices to move to, and how would that be taken care of?
Yes, we have a list of all the spaces that we currently lease and how much space is in them, and we call it the same terms as, so you can move people into vacant space that's in that building for the same terms as they're currently paying now. And yes, we look at that.
Okay. And one second question, since I got Ms. Johnson in front of us, has there been a meeting yet with LRC to talk about Senate Bill 122, the management of the parking and cleaning and maintenance of these spaces that we're in? Has that meeting occurred?
I believe that we may have had something that was scheduled but had to be rescheduled for some reason.
Perfect.
But
I just
I'll,
wanna-
I'll go back and follow up on that, and
Very good.
we'll get something set.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see, Senator Mays Bledsoe.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question. What is the sequencing plan for moving out?
I don't think that we have anything concrete because right now we don't have the construction plan because we have not got the bidding for that again. And Sam, you can certainly step in and help me if you want to here. But we are still working on bidding the construction, so some of those things will be determined on how we are going to proceed. That will impact how we need to relocate the current tenants. So we will have more concrete information, I think, as we get further along this summer into next year.
And I would add, but in light of that future information, we're actively working on where is space available? What is the current space being occupied? What are the needs of those that are currently in the Capitol? We're not waiting to know the when necessarily to understand, the what in terms of what are their needs are. So Commissioner Ruth and his staff are in the process, as Senator Mills had asked, to identify available space so that we're preparing, for the various occupants of the Capitol to eventually relocate.
And we've met with each agency and gave them a survey. What do you need? How many people do you have? How much file space do you need? Offices, meeting rooms. So we asked them to fill out, what are your wants versus your needs, and we'll use that to try to find appropriate homes for everybody.
Would it be fair to say that, so as those become available, sometimes the fit may work as to your sequencing? For instance, if you have availability with the right fit, that may move faster than maybe a priority office or a different office. Is that?
Very good possibility, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Last question, Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John, this question is for you and Secretary Johnson. My understanding in your prefatory remarks was construction is not going to begin until June of 2024. So if that's the case, it will not impact the 2024 session at all. That both chambers will be able to conduct business as usual through April 15th of 2024. Is that correct?
That is the intent, yes, and that is what's going to happen.
Thank you, Secretary Johnson.
Thank you, Senator. And last question: when was this bid to? And I think you said the EOP referred or received or was the awarded the bid. When was that bidded out originally?
I don't recall. I can get that information.
Okay, and I'm just concerned about the timing. If this is bid out, we're my understanding it's 2020. I don't know if that's right or not, but that's what I understand. It's been 3 years. It seems like things could go a little along faster. So I know y'all staying on top of it. And there's a lot of moving parts, but I know there's a lot of anxious folks, not only in the General Assembly, but also in the other constitutional offices. So, and I know you're trying to put your best foot forward and get this, and it's not an easy task, but I just stay on top of it and keep pushing hard.
And the scope changed. Originally, it was a electric and a little bit of MEP work.
Okay.
But as we got into, or as EOP got into, and they would discover more and more things, it turned into, if we're going to do this, let's do it right. And with the support of legislators, we were able to say, let's do it right, do it so it's going to last another 50 years.
And I appreciate that comment. Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And we have about 12 minutes left, and the area district area district, let me say this again, area development districts. Golly. It's one of those days, having a little tongue twisting. And I apologize for the time crunch that y'all have. So I know if you can be as quick as possible, but very concise, we really appreciate this. And once again, I apologize for the tight time frame. If you don't mind, go ahead and introduce yourselves, and then you got the floor.
Good morning. My name is Jason Vinson. I'm the Executive Director of the Pennyrile Area Development District down in Hopkinsville.
Casey Ellis, the Executive Director of the Kentucky Council of Area Development Districts.
Rebecca Hartsoe, Babbage co-founder for Grant Ready Kentucky.
Billy Johnson, Executive Director for the Office of State and Federal Grants, Department of Local Government. Whitney Chestnut, the Executive Director at the Cumberland Valley Ad located in Lake.
All right, good. I want to thank everyone here for having us come present on House Bill 9, the grant bill, which stands for Government Resources Accelerating Needed Transformation. I know I speak for everybody at the table, and I know many of you that this may be one of the most significant pieces of policy that we do in a generation here for Kentucky. Thought I'd begin by giving a bit of a recap for how we arrived to House Bill 9. Late last fall, we became aware through our client Grant Ready Kentucky that over $3 trillion was going to be released by the federal government in the form of competitive grants. What was most interesting is that within that $3 trillion, there was a pool of funds set aside, prioritized, for 25 areas across the country that have suffered economic downturns and job losses due to the fossil fuel industry. On that list of 25, number 2 on that list is a collection of 21 counties in eastern Kentucky. Number 6 on that list is a collection of 20 counties in western Kentucky. During session, that pool of funds for those 25 areas across the country hovered around $185 billion. Simple math, 185 divided by 25, you're at $7.5 billion for each one, and we've got 2. Now, that's making grand assumptions about getting all of that, but you can just imagine how significant of an opportunity this was. The scenario, though, is that most federal grants require a match, anywhere from 10 to 50%. And for these very impoverished rural areas, that's just prohibitive. Almost it's inherently exclusionary. They can't come up with even 10%, let alone 50%. So what do you do about that? We were seeing across the country that other states, particularly our neighboring states, Indiana, West Virginia, and Ohio, were creating pools of funds for that match so that their communities could go after these federal grants and use a portion of funds to help with the match. So that was the impetus for House Bill 9, and that's what we've done here. We were really fortunate, the General Assembly, thank you for allocating $2 million to get this off the ground for this year. What I can report is that since session, that $185 billion pool has grown to, as of June 1st last week, $966 billion, nearly $1 trillion for 25 areas across the country. What have we been doing since session to get this up off the ground? So what House Bill 9 does is allows for a local government, a nonprofit entity, or an ad to apply to the state for the matching component of a federal grant. Once that entity goes secures the matching component, they can apply for the federal grant. If they secure it and are successful, then Department for Local Government releases the funds, and then from there we go on that process. At the request of Chairman Petrie, he has asked us to create and convene a working group of stakeholders who will meet monthly to talk about where we stand, share information, support, resources, just a critical mass of people who are committed to seeing that this is successful and as impactful as possible. Since May, we have been on the horn calling everybody, the ads who are here, DLG, local government associations, nonprofits, universities, and our federal delegation, as well as budget staff, who will meet monthly as we go through the interim to sort of update on the progress of House Bill 9 and where it stands. Just to tell you that very quickly, the response from everyone has been enormously positive. Everybody wants to be a part of this, wants to collaborate, wants to see it be successful. So I'll turn it over to, Billy, you want to go first?
Talk to me
first and tell you about
Thank
what
you.
DLG's been doing.
I'll echo everything that Rebecca said. With the meetings that we have been having, actually, I think we said we were going to do monthly meetings, but we've become a more so of a weekly meeting. We're usually talking to somebody. So we're making a lot of headway. Right now, the Department of Local Government has been tasked with proposing and drafting an application. And this application will have evaluation criteria, project eligibility, a scoring system, and a ranking process. Once we have the draft ready to go, we're going to share this with our stakeholders and ask for feedback and any suggestions that they may have going forward. Once again, thanks for the appropriation for the $2 million, because that will help our department with the intent of administrating the process and the guidelines. I think going forward, it's important for DLG to also educate across the state to these eligible groups and to the counties that are listed for them to know how this process works. We have a lot of existing processes at the Department for Local Government, so we have a really good advantage to go ahead and establish something pretty quickly, and I think we will have something very soon to be able to share back with you all. We are collecting a lot of data and a lot of feedback, and so thank you again. I feel like this is really going to be beneficial.
Thank you. As Rebecca mentioned, the collaboration's really been something special. It's kind of great to see everybody come together and work in concert for such a tremendous opportunity. Of course, the core of your area development districts is collaboration. It's to bring all local governments together and to do collectively what we can't do on our own. So with that, we've been in communications with the Kentucky County Judge Executive Association, the Magistrates and Commissioners Association, and we'll be presenting next Wednesday, along with other folks in this room, to the elected officials registered for that conference. I think at last count it was just over 100 representatives from the 41 communities. We'll be there. We'll all be there to kind of put that charge into them and to kind of give them the lay of the land as to what is expected of Department of Local Government, your area development districts, and them as elected officials. They have a large task in this as well. So we are working with DLG, of course, hand in hand with DLG to put together and identify the best possible eligible for our eligible communities and all entities, not just our communities. We're ramping up efforts to be the clearinghouse for all of the designated priority communities. We'll be providing DLG with a comprehensive list of all of these projects, and they will be paired with the potential federal grant program. This will help streamline their process and allow them to make a much better recommendation for state funding. Of course, that process in our regions has already begun, and so we have with us Jason and Whitney as they introduce themselves, just to give you a brief overview of what's going on in their regions.
So as Casey said, I think I'm here just to briefly articulate what the need is from the boots on the ground. And let me just say this, what you all are talking about here, what you have done and what hopefully could be done and will be done with House Bill 9, it will be a game changer for our communities across the state. I spent just a little time earlier this week looking at our projects in our district, which are 9 counties in West Kentucky. 7 of those counties are eligible for the fund that Rebecca is talking about. Again, about 15 minutes looking at our active project list, those projects that are under development, that have not received funding, and I quickly identified about $164 million worth of projects that we are still looking for funding for. That includes Representative Bridges, the project in Marion, which is about a $40 million water treatment plant expansion. And so that's just to name an example of what we're talking about that these funds could be utilized for. As Rebecca mentioned, that a lot of these grant programs, which we work with already on a daily basis, require a 10% match, a 20% match, a 50% match, maybe even a 70% match. But just using a 20% match number on that $164 million, we're looking at $32,855,000 that we could potentially need in match just for our region down in West Kentucky. So again, just giving you a little indication of what we're looking at and how these programs will benefit our area.
And we have about 7 minutes left.
Okay, thank you.
That includes questions too.
I'm Whitney Chestnut again from the Cumberland Valley Area Development District, and I represent 8 counties. And 4 of my counties are included in this, which are Bell, Clay, Harlan, and Jackson. And I, like Jason, spent a few minutes looking at projects that are in the development phases and what that means in regard to this. And I also want to thank you because this is a game changer for us and for our communities. I quickly identified about $53,751,848 dollars worth of projects with a need of about $10,750,370 for match that's needed. And I have Eastern Kentucky. My communities, a lot of times, they have needs and the money is there, but they can't come up with the match. And that really is a deal breaker for them. So they're very pleased with this and excited, to say the least. And just a few of my projects, like Jason mentioned, would be one which is about a $20 million project for Clay County, City of Manchester. That would be a new water source for them. They're currently getting their water from a river, and it would be moving to Laurel County and taking water out of Laurel Lake over to Clay County and Manchester. So that's about a $20 million project with, like Jason said, that we would need about a $4 million match for that. So if you all have any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer. But we took a quick look at our projects, and I'm just so excited about this opportunity, and thank you again for everything that you do.
Thank you. Rebecca, you have like 15 seconds to wrap up so we go to questions.
No, I'm here for questions. I do want to take the time to single out Representative Petrie and also Representative Heath on their leadership on this initiative.
Great. Representative Johnson?
So very quickly, I'm already hearing two different numbers. So I'm anticipating that well before we get into session, you guys are going to come together with a consolidated request, yes?
That's
Thank
the
you.
plan.
Senator Funky Meyer.
Yes, and Whitney, you are a woman after my own heart with those specific, all the way down to the dollar numbers that you're working on. Are there people outside of Kentucky that are able to come in? Maybe they have tourism influence or recreation influence that are very interested in expanding in Eastern Kentucky.
I can't think off the top of my head of any specifics, but I'm sure that there are. And one of the projects that we have identified is an economic development project in Clay County that would make a difference involving tourism opportunities.
I'll also add here, just there's nothing in House Bill 9 that prohibits private investment from also contributing to that match. And so that would also be incredibly helpful towards that. Indiana set aside $500 million a year and a half ago. And for the combination of that $500 million plus private investment, they yielded a 20-to-1 return rate and almost $9.86 billion in funding. So, yes.
Thank you. Chairman Petrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And there you go. And there you go. So, one, thank y'all for your efforts. I'm glad to hear the monthly is there, and I'm glad to hear the almost weekly. This is an important piece. Representative Heath, I appreciate him for working on this. Appreciate what y'all are doing, and I'm going to boil this back down to budget concerns at this point. We have in the East, hopefully this is accurate, this come from Ms. Hartzell some time ago, so hopefully it hasn't changed. Bell County, Breathitt County, Carter County, Clay County, Elliott, Floyd, Harlan, Jackson, Johnson, Knott, Lawrence, Lee, Leslie, Letcher, McGoffin, Martin, Morgan, Owsley, Perry, Pike, Wolf. If you have any connection with those counties or care about somebody in those counties, make sure they know about House Bill 9 and understand that they are second preference, second tier consideration in the entire country. There are many more tiers than 1 and 2. They're at second tier preference. If they make an application, meet the eligibility, they are at the top of the list for consideration of extraordinarily large grant possibilities for fundamental infrastructure as well as everything else you can possibly imagine, with nearly $1 trillion available in those grant pools now. It is a broad spectrum. Do not think narrow. Do not think shallow. Think very broad and very deep. Likewise, in the West, Ballard, Breckenridge, Caldwell, Callaway, Carlisle, Crittenden, Fulton, Graves, Grayson, Hickman, Hopkins, Livingston, Lyon, Marshall, McCracken, Muhlenberg, Ohio, Todd, Union, and Webster counties. The same thing, except for you're in 6th tier preference in the entire country, which means you're still near the top of the list for everything that I just described. Now boil it back down to budget. Representative Johnson and Senator Mills is going to ask something very similar. Well, how much money are we talking about? Other states have put in hundreds of billions of dollars. We've seen some of that come to fruition with grants that have already been approved. What this is grants have always been available. However, what happened in House Bill 9 is that the state is saying, look, we can pony up and put money into a holding account. And that holding account can be used for match money up to its entirety required for these type of grants in these counties for the purposes specified, which are broad and deep.
Very encompassing.
Now, the reason I've been so appreciative of these people getting together and working on this issue is this. We put $2 million in as a placeholder to help DLG and to help everybody understand we're serious. It might help with personnel to coordinate things and identify those grants, great, and greater. However, when we're putting the budget together, all of us are working on it. How are we going to stump for putting more money than $2 million in if no one has any real interest in it? So the reason I'm stoking up interest is because I believe in it, one, and two, it's there. Three, if other people look into it in great detail and believe in it and find, look, we need a match of $600 million. We need a match of $776 billion. Not saying you'll get it, but at least now you can argue with everybody in A&R on every budget review subcommittee like we need money and this is what we're going to do with it. Okay, if we don't have that interest, if we don't see that metrics for how we're going to make the decision, we don't see that interest on the ground, then the conversations get a lot cooler and cold fast. So I encourage anybody with a connection, senator or representative or anyone within listening of this, make contact with your ads, make contact with the ad council. Do not bother DLG with this. They're not on that part of it. They're on the match part. Hearts all. Make contact with them. Find out. Get involved with it. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
May I have one thing just to piggyback on Chairman? So the Governor of Indiana said Ready was so successful, but they are appropriating even more funding and money for it. So states are seeing this. They're seeing how successful it is and how it can be leveraged. So just to tell you that, they're going back for more.
Think we got
One thing.
like 5 seconds.
July 26th, I would recommend the folks out west to put that on your calendar. We are hosting the Intergovernmental Working Group from the federal agencies down in the western part of the state, and that'll be an opportunity for everyone to come hear what these programs will fund.
Thank you, Rebecca, and your colleagues for all your efforts, and I know there's a lot of enthusiasm, and appreciate your support, and thank you all very much for being here. We will reconvene on the 19th of July. My co-chair, Freeland, will be the chair of that meeting, and we stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.